Hello Year 10 and welcome to your paper 1 question 2 walking talking mark. Now we've already read the source earlier on, we've done question 1 and now we're focusing on question 2. One of the first things that you need to remember that this question is all about language, okay? So it's about making sure that whatever you are saying, whatever your analysis is actually focused and rooted in this starting from a language kind of perspective. And this is why, now remember, when we give you acronyms like PETAL or pretzel or PETA or whatever, any of those, they're ultimately, what they're asking you to do is to follow the mark scheme. So I like to follow this idea of following TP. Okay? And I tend to write it because it helps me remember, okay? So TP is all about writing about the technique. All of this is in your knowledge book. Technique. Then you put the evidence of that technique. So I'm rooting it in language. The writer's using this technique. Then I put the evidence. Then I've got like a purpose, a point. I'm answering the question in there. And then I look at the effects. Now, when I'm exploring the effects, what I tend to do to help me develop my answer is use this idea of kind of like, I call them magic circles. They're not necessarily magic, but it just helps me remember that I want to be exploring what different words make me think of. So I tend to zoom in on a word, okay, so that is my zooming in. So I zoom in on a word that I've chosen that is probably, so it's somewhere in my evidence. I'm gonna write this like this way. I zoom in on one word from my evidence, and then I try to think about what does it make me think of and what images is it creating. And I try to say at least, I might be able to say more, I try to say at least 3 to 4 things about that word, okay? Now, as I'm 1, 2, 3, 4 things, okay? I try to think about 4 ideas, images, themes that my word tends to create that answers the focus of the question. So the phrases that I use in between is like, I say something like the writer uses the word whatever to create an image of. So I'm trying to emphasize what does that word create an image of, and that this word might be highlighting something, and that it might be emphasizing something. And all of this in terms of like what it's creating. And then I always like to write about how it might be symbolizing something, an idea, okay? And that helps me really develop my analysis. And I tend to, as I'm analyzing the extract, I tend to look for those ideas. The other thing that I do want to make sure though, that I do every now and then in this answer is that I'm also using the word because, okay? So if I say, for example, this word creates an image of this and this, that I want to also ensure that I'm explaining why I think what I think. And that is going to push my answer actually towards that kind of level 3 response. So a 5 or a 6 out of 8. Now, I've started with this because rather than even looking at the extract, because if I know how to answer the question, that's about 50% of the work done. All I have to now do is make sure that I find the techniques that I need and that I'm answering the actual question. Now, the question says, how does the writer use language? So I know that I need to structure my answer something like this to present Wildfell Hall. Now, as I'm reading, I need to make sure that I find techniques, language that I can analyze to help me answer this question. Now, one of the things that I've noticed throughout the papers is that there are 5 techniques that I've seen always being used in any of the papers across the last few years. Now, my magic 5, my key 5 techniques that I've always seen in every text that they've put out is they always have a simile, okay? So as I'm reading, I might be looking for that simile if it is there. And they might use a simile, but might not answer the question, so you do need to be careful with that. I might find a metaphor, okay? I might find personification. There's always a bit of personification in there. I might find a semantic field. Can I be honest? Semantic field. And I tend to shorten that to SF, okay, just to make it as I'm annotating, a semantic field. And then there's always some form of juxtaposition stroke contrast. Now I'm going to be honest, those pupils that identify that juxtaposition, that contrast, and write well about it, they tend to be the ones that actually hit that level 4 kind of 8 out of 8 kind of response. Now this is why I like looking at semantic fields actually, because if you notice a juxtaposing semantic field, that is even better and allows you to explore a range of things. So just as a reminder, a simile is when we're using the word like to compare something to something else or is as something. A metaphor is when you're saying it is that thing. Personification is making an inanimate object into a human. A semantic field is when a group of words have got similar ideas or they emphasize a similar idea. And then juxtaposition or contrast is when you have two opposing ideas right next to each other. Okay? So I'm going to read the extract now. As I'm reading the extract, I'm finding words, phrases, techniques that are about Wildfell Hall, describing that atmosphere, that sense of what Wildfell Hall is like. Okay, so I'm going to read it and then see what I find. Near the top of the hill, about 2 miles from Linden Car, stood Wildfell Hall, a superannuated Elizabethan mansion of dark grey stone, venerable and picturesque, yet cold and gloomy, a forgotten relic of a bygone era, standing in silent defiance against time. Its thick stone window frames, lattice panes, and time-worn air holes added to its bleak appearance. Exposed on a lonely hilltop, it was shielded only by a storm-blighted trees as grim as the hall itself, the twisted branches reaching out like skeleton fingers grasping at the sky. Behind lay a desolate field and heath, before it a neglected garden, once carefully shaped but now overtaken by weeds, weather, and decay. Overgrown hedges, a broken statue of a swan, and distorted laurel figures gave it an eerie and almost ghostly presence. So looking at this, the first thing that I noticed, I definitely noticed, I'm going to say, a bit of a metaphor, and then also it turns into personification. So the first thing that it says is that it is, one minute, here, yet a cold, gloomy, a forgotten relic. Okay, so that of a bygone era, that phrase there, a forgotten relic of a bygone era, is a metaphor. So I'm going to actually label that. So the writer uses a metaphor to describe Wildfell Hall. Now, what does this metaphor tells me, or what does this metaphor tell me about Wildfell Hall? Well, in particular, I would actually assume about this idea that it is old. However, if I zoom in on the word relic, okay, so I've got my zooming in here and I would do my magic circles. The word relic makes me think of actually something that is a bit valuable, because when I think of a relic, I think it creates an image of something that is valuable. It creates an image of something that is, if something is valuable, it makes me think of something important. Okay, so I'm starting to think about, what does the word relic make me think of? Something valuable, something important. What might be highlighting? It might suggest that it is actually maybe, I've got the word old, so maybe something that has survived time. Okay, so I've got that idea there. Also, relic makes me think of something nostalgic. Now that means about thinking about the past, and a bit let me think, a bit I've put old, I don't want to put old again. It makes me think of maybe a bit of decay as well. Now, when I look at my magic circles here for the word relic, I actually have got a bit of kind of two ideas. I've got valuable and important, and then I've got something that survived time, nostalgic, and decay. So I would say that those three kind of go together, and then those two kind of go together. I also thought, like, when I think of a relic, I also think maybe sometimes of something a bit kind of like a religious object. So I'm going to add that here, religious object. And when I think of a religious object, then I think that it should be something that is important and that should be followed. So look at the way that I've got loads of ideas about just this idea that it is a relic. So it may be forgotten and abandoned, but that it is an important building, that it is valuable, that is like, by using the word relic, it makes me think of something religious. In addition, the word relic makes me think of something that has survived time, and therefore that it has got an element of nostalgia, but ultimately maybe something that is old and is decaying. Okay, so just looking at that, I've already got loads of ideas just talking about that metaphor. The other thing that I notice is not only have I got a forgotten relic, but then I've got almost this contrasting idea with it that says, I'm going to highlight it differently so that you can see it, that is standing in silent defiance against time. Now, a house can't stand in silent defiance, so this makes me think of, or that makes me think that this is personification. Okay? Now, in particular, the word that makes me think about, that I would analyze and zoom in, is this word defiance. Because actually, when I think of something like kind of being in defiance of, it makes me think of a resistance. Okay, so something resisting against something. And then, therefore, it makes me think that something is got like bold, like boldness, like courageous. So, like, this house might be old, but it's, defiant, it's resistant, it's bold. And it's emphasizing, like, I'm going to add actually this word of kind of idea of survival. It has survived time. So, even though it might be old, it has survived time. Also, when I think of the word defiance, it makes me think of something that is strong. And if I think of something that is strong, it makes me think that it is something that has power. Okay, so look at the ideas I'm developing. I've got this resistance, this boldness, this idea of surviving, but also I've got this idea of strength and I've got power. And in particular, though, when I think of the words of defiance, it makes me think of, of somebody that's been a bit proud. So it makes me think of this idea of almost pride. And because there's this sense of pride, because of its history, because of its worth, it makes me think of like the house is kind of like grand. So I'm going to put the word grandeur. Okay. Now look, if I was in the exam, I might already start writing my answer. I've got the technique metaphor, I've got the technique personification, and I've already got loads of ideas that I could be writing about. Remember, for this question, you've only got about 10 minutes, okay? And that includes generating your ideas and then writing it down. Of course, today with the walking talking mod, because I'm explaining it, is taking a bit longer. Now, the other technique that I noticed, so look, I've got metaphor and I've got personification. I've actually noticed those two straight away. Now, I did notice a bit of a simile. It says here, it was shielded only by storm-blighted trees, as grim as the hole itself, the twisted branches reaching out like skeleton fingers grasping in the sky. Now, I'm not going to focus on that simile, because that simile is not describing the house itself, it's actually describing the storm-blighted trees. And so I'm going to leave that one, because I think I'll have to make connections to the house. And at the moment, that's just describing the trees. So I'm going to leave that simile. I don't think it fits my answer. The other thing that I did notice, though, is that there was very much a semantic field of kind of this idea of neglect. And I've got that through, there's quite a few words actually that fit in that semantic field. I've got the word cold, I've got gloomy, I've got bleak. Look, it gets described bleak in appearance. Actually, I might let me just do that in pink so it stands out for you. So I've got cold, I've got gloomy, I've got bleak. I also got the word time worn. Again, it makes it seem old and a bit dilapidated. I've also got the word desolate. That's a great word there. Desolate. Again, makes it sound a bit cold and empty and barren. No, that's to do with the trees. A neglected garden. I'm going to highlight that word neglected. I've got the word decay. Okay, so I'm highlighting all these words. All these words create, I think, a bit of a semantic field. So I'm going to put here. So I'm just writing all of these words. And then just so that I can see, this is my semantic field, okay? I've got a semantic field, actually, of, so I'm going to put semantic field, SF, of decay. Now, I don't actually want to use the word decay because, look, I've got the word decay there. So maybe it creates a semantic field of being old and broken, okay? So that the house has been like old and broken. Now, in particular, if I started to zoom in on different words, I might actually choose like the word cold, yet cold and gloomy. Like the word cold, semantic, like analyzing and zooming in on that word, kind of cold makes me think of something that lacks warmth, that is maybe uncomfortable. Okay, kind of writing my words, say uncomfortable, and ultimately it might suggest that there's something quite unwelcoming about the house. Okay, so look at that, I've got kind of my symbolism as well, so lacks of warmth, uncomfortable and unwelcoming. Now, because I've chosen the semantic field of old and broken, then I zoom in on the word cold, I can say these things, but then I can zoom in as well on the word like bleak. Now, the word bleak makes me think of something that is gloomy. Now, I don't want to say gloomy because I've already got the word gloomy there, but I might think of something like bleak is quite negative, so I'm going to write the word like negative just because it'll get me going. So it makes me think of something that is negative. It makes me think of something that is lacking, so all to do with lacking optimism. So a bit sad. And I might use actually the word, I really like this word, like melancholy. Melancholy. And melancholy means like a sadness. So there's something sad about the house. So look at how many ideas I've got for bleak there. Negative, lack of optimism, sad, melancholy. Have I said uncomfortable? Yeah, I've already said uncomfortable. Maybe there's also, well, I can't fit my magic circles there. And maybe there's a lack of hope. Okay, so look at that semantic field. I've got all those things there. However, whilst the house is being presented in this way, there's also a bit more of a positive kind of semantic field associated with the house. And you get that actually with the word venerable, okay, and the word picturesque, and the word, actually I might go here with the word defiance, and anything else I might think is a bit positive. Behind late, no, I'm probably going to stick with that. Now, these three words, okay, they create, I think, more of a semantic field of tradition, okay, or strength, or something being beautiful, or status. Let's put that, a semantic field of status. Okay, like venerable, remember venerable meant, let me see, where's my source? Venerable meant this idea of meaning respected due to age or character, so something that has got experience and wisdom. So I really like this one because it suggests that actually the house, even though it's a bit ineffective, is no longer fit for purpose, that actually you've got this idea of it being respected or respected. That as well, look, I'm going to do my magic circles. It gives me a sense of that the house is something to be admired. That the house has prestige. Like prestige means like the idea of reputation. And therefore, that is actually quite wealthy. And again, adding to that idea of value. It has value, it is important. So look at the way that I've got actually two semantic fields there. I've got semantic field that suggests that it's old, broken, neglected, but then I've also got this idea that the house is actually powerful and has status and prestige. So if I was going to summarize actually what I've done here now is I've got actually 4 techniques that I can talk in general. So I've got a metaphor, I've got personification, I've got a semantic field of old and broken, I've got a semantic field of status, and actually I can juxtapose or look at the contrast between those two. So what I'm going to say that actually 4 techniques out of the 5 are in this extract. Now your teacher's going to pause the video for 15 minutes and you are going to now get the opportunity to write your own response. After that, you'll see what a good sample answer looks like. Okay, so let's go through the sample answer. Now, what I'm going to do is I'm going to show you that actually a lot of the phrases you can use in your own responses. Now, you want to memorize how to string your ideas together. I call it almost painting by numbers. Like, all you are adding into your response is the ideas that you've got from the extract. So you already know 50% of what you have to do. Now, because this is a language question, I'm going to start with TP. I start with the writer uses. Now, the technique that I am going to analyze is actually the use of personification. But remember, any of the other things is fine because they are techniques and they give you an answer. But I'm going to use the use of personification in particular for my answer. So my answer will start like this. So I'm going to write it quite nice and big so that you can see it. So I might go over to the next page. So the writer uses personification when she writes. Now look at this, I've got my technique, personification. I'm going to highlight that so that you can see that. I've got my technique, personification. I start my answer with the writer uses because I'm focusing on techniques. When she writes, now I'm going to put where that personification is. I'm not going to quote the whole sentence. Where is the personification? It's just there, standing in silent defiance against time. So personification, when she writes, standing in silent defiance against time. Now what I've done there is I have put my evidence, okay, so personification, and then I write my evidence. But I can use these phrases the writer uses when she writes or he writes is something that I can take to the exam with me and use every time. Now for the purpose and the point, okay, I need to make sure that I'm talking about how this is presenting Wildfell Hall. So this is what I'm going to do. So the writer uses personification when she writes, standing in silent defiance against time, to describe, so I need to be answering the question, to describe how Wildfell Hall, so I'm answering, look, to present, to describe, I'm answering the question, Wildfell Hall as a strong and well-built mansion. Okay, so this is already going to give me like 2 marks maybe because I'm answering the question. As a strong and well-built mansion, and I'm going to add this phrase which just makes me sound a bit more sophisticated, despite being neglected. Okay, so I'm showing that I understand the way that the mansion, Wildfell Hall, is being presented. And I'm saying this is like, this quotes, this personification in particular, tells me that it is strong and well built. Okay, that's what I'm going to focus on. Alright, so what do I do now? I've done my technique, I've done my evidence, I've done my purpose, so I need to zoom in to do my effects. And in particular here, I'm going to zoom in on the word defiance. So, look at what I do. The use of the word, and I'm going to put that now in quotation marks, defiance, close quotation marks, creates an image of. Now, when I go to my magic circle, so this is actually, this is why thinking about it first makes it a lot quicker. So the use of the word defiance creates an image of, look, I'm going to go up here, go back to my magic circles. What's my first word? Resistance. Okay, I'm going to use that one. I'm going to take it as I go along. I've got resistance. Creates an image of resistance and what other word do I have here? Boldness. Okay, and boldness. Now, I want to make sure that the examiner knows why I think this. Okay, I need to make sure that he understands why I think this. And I put the word because, so I'm going to explain, because it suggests that the whole has withstood time as it has not been destroyed. Okay, now at the moment here, just writing this, I'm actually on a level 2. Okay, I'm explaining, I've zoomed in on a word, and I've actually said, look, I'm going to say how many things I've said about defiance already. I said that it creates an image of resistance, and then I've talked about it being bold, and then on top of that, I've explained why I think that. So this answer, just that bit there, is starting to get me into that level 2. But remember, we want to go higher. So I would say something like this, in addition. So I'm developing my answer, really good connective, like furthermore, in addition, comma, the word, so I'm zooming on it again, the word defiance highlights strength and power. So look, I've done, let me see, I've done strong and powerful, okay? So I've got that there, a strength and power symbolizing, so I always want to put there, how the whole has survived even, let's try that again, even the hostility of nature. Now if I wanted to, I could add here, as the trees are described as storm, it says here, as the trees are storm blighted trees. I can, but I'm going to actually leave it because I haven't got much time, and I need to make sure that I'm answering the question in as much detail as possible. Okay, so the hostility of nature. What else can I say? Survive even the hostility of nature, and like I feel like this resistance creates an image of fighting. So I'm going to use that word, and is fighting against the decay. Okay, so that now I'm actually starting to hit that level 3. It's a really clear, well explained response. Now to hit into that level 4, I'm going to talk about actually ultimately how also like this word has connotations of, or makes me think of being proud, almost like, you know, like somebody that's a bit feels affronted or attacked by somebody's suggestion. So I'm going to like use that. Now look, I said in addition, so I'm now going to use furthermore. Furthermore, comma, the word defiance, makes me think of. Now guys, you can write up like this. Makes me think of, you are a reader. So when you're talking about the effects, if you talk about what it makes you think of, you are that reader. You're talking about the effects. Makes me think of being proud, suggesting the whole as historical has a historical, that's why it didn't make sense, a historical background, and thus, now thus is just a really nice posh word of saying and so, and thus it highlights, let's see what I've got here, highlights, oh, I've said the word pride, I want to use the word grandeur. It highlights the grandeur of the mansion. Highlights the grandeur of the mansion, suggesting, let's develop that, suggesting it will not be destroyed because of its value and significance against the landscape. Now, ideally, you want to be able to write another paragraph like this, okay? So you've written one, and then you want to be able to write actually another one. Now, so I'm saying that for this question, you want to make sure that you do like TP times 2 at least. Now, this, at the moment, guys, this is probably at the top of a level 3 plus. If you wanted to get this question into that level 4, what I might then talk about is the way that the writer contrasts this idea of grandeur with the semantic field of the decay. Okay, and that might be something that would push your answer onto that level 4. Now, I'm going to stick up to level 3, okay, because if you are somebody that can write a level 4, I don't like to give you too many ideas because you may have an even better idea, okay? So, look at the way that this answer, in particular, like follows the magic circles. It's got all the words that I had kind of in circles. I've got resistance, I've got boldness, I've got this idea of withstand this time. In addition, the word defines highlights the strength, highlights the power, symbolizing how the whole has survived. All these words I'm explaining in loads of detail what I learn about the whole, even the hostility of nature and its fighting against the decay. Furthermore, the word defiance, I need to make sure that I put that in quotation marks because it's from the text, makes me think of, love that phrase, it's really like this word makes me think of this, and if it matches the text, you're probably on the right tracks. It makes me think of being proud, suggesting the whole has a historical background, and thus it highlights the grandeur of the mansion, suggesting it will not be destroyed because of its nature and significance against the landscape. So I would probably give this, towards the end actually, maybe a level 4 minus, so a 7 out of 8. Now remember, across the country, the average mark for this question is about 4 point something. So if you get in 5, you're getting then more than half marks, okay? Hopefully you can now check your own answers. Let's see what you can add and improve your responses.